Alright, hello everyone. This is going to be a video just going over the recent developments that have occurred with the Skyward Sword any percent run, and will probably affect more categories as well, but this is just specifically going to be talking about how this applies to the any percent category. So, a little while ago, on June 13th, 2020, a community member in the Skyward Sword speedrunning community who goes by the name Copernicus, figured out how to complete the Lanayru Song of the Hero Quest early, without having to have properly triggered the Song of the Hero Quest with Levias. Basically, this works by being able to activate a specific Phi trigger that should only trigger after you've already beaten the Lanayru quest, but in this case, activating that Phi trigger ends up setting the flag that the quest has been beaten and that the Thunder Dragon has been properly healed and all that stuff. This Phi trigger is only located on a specific layer in the Lanayru Gorge, so there are two specific RBMs that we have to do to make this work. RBM standing for Reverse Bit Magic, and if you don't know what that is, there's a link to an explanation video in the description. So in this case, we need to do one Reverse Bit Magic iteration to skip the minecart escort, because getting the proper layer of the Lanayru Gorge map requires having completed, the slow, auto-scroller minecart escort that happens in the Lanayru Gorge. So how this works is we can set a specific flag, again using Reverse Bit Magic, and then we can run around out of bounds on the Lanayru Gorge map. We can go to the final portion of where the minecart escort is, and if we drown in the sand near where that door to the final part is, the minecart will actually spawn in right there at the end of the minecart section, or near the end. Alright, it's not in the final spot directly, but it's pretty close. This is very nice because the only item that we need to complete the minecart escort from here is just a single bomb. The previous parts require things like, the bow, the claw shots, the whip, but thankfully we can skip that because we don't have any of those items, so that's very convenient. And then we just have to wait for the minecart to finally lock into place. And once it's locked into place, we can do a second Reverse Bit Magic iteration to trigger the Phi text that I previously mentioned. So when we finish that one, the Phi text then pops up and the Thunder Dragon is considered to be healed. Now, one of the side effects of being able to do this is that it allows us to access the Thunder Dragon's boss rush a lot earlier than we're normally supposed to be able to, right? So by healing the Thunder Dragon with these RBMs and then going to go talk to him, we can fight the bosses of the boss rush. We can fight any of them because we do runs on a hero mode file. But there were certain programming decisions that were made for how the boss rush works that we can actually exploit to save a lot of time in Skyward Sword any percent. So the first thing to note about the boss rush is that with the exception of the late game bosses, those being Levias, actually no, not Levias, but Demise, the Horde, Girahim 3, and the Imprisoned 3, those bosses you may or may not have fought by the time that you get to the boss rush minigame. So if you want to fight those bosses, the game will remember will remember whether or not you've actually fought those bosses when you go into boss rush, and it will work around the flags and triggers correctly to spawn those bosses in their actual boss rooms, and then it will reset everything to what it was beforehand when the boss rush is over. But that same logic does not hold for the previous bosses, because the game assumes that if you've made it to the boss rush minigame, you must have already fought all those previous bosses, right? So the game actually does not check to see whether or not you have completed certain story events up till that point, like in English properly. The game will just automatically set certain story events if you go into the boss rush fight for those previous bosses and then finish the fight by either beating the boss or just dying, right? So the important situations to know about here are that if you fight the first iteration of the Imprisoned, where the Imprisoned doesn't have any arms or a tail or anything, in the boss rush, and then you complete that fight either again by winning or dying, the game will set the flags saying that the player has completed both the Ancient Cistern and the Fire Sanctuary, right? And this is really important because this means that we no longer have to complete the Ancient Cistern and the Fire Sanctuary. And again, this only happens because the game assumes that to get to the boss rush, we must have completed the Ancient Cistern and the Fire Sanctuary. And the reason it gets rid of those flags at the beginning of this boss rush fight is because, at least specifically for the Ancient Cistern, having completed the Ancient Cistern is what spawns the Grusinator in the Sealed Grounds, right? And you're not supposed to have the Grusinator for the Imprisoned 1 fight, so the game says, okay, we need to get rid of this flag so that the Grusinator doesn't appear for Imprisoned 1, and then set the flag back again when the fight's over, so if the player goes back there naturally, the Grusinator is still there. Right? And that's important to do because we specifically need the Ancient Cistern is completed flag if we want the Imprisoned 2 fight to not crash. So then what we can do is we can fight the second Imprisoned fight in the boss rush, and at this point, the game assumes that you must have already beaten the Imprisoned 2, so it gets rid of the flag that says the Imprisoned 2 has been beaten so that you can properly load the fight and then, go through the boss rush sequence. And then once that fight is over, it will reset the value for having beaten the Imprisoned 2. So, ironically, in the any % run now, we're going to load the Imprisoned 1 fight so that we can specifically set us having beaten the Ancient Cistern and the Fire Sanctuary, Ancient Cistern for the Grusinator track, and then we will load into the Imprisoned 2 fight. We will die in the Imprisoned 2 fight, and this will set the value that says the Imprisoned 2 has been beaten, even though we just died to it, which I think is kind of funny, the fact that it works out this way. And then from there, we have all the flags that we need to open up the Gate of Time and make it to the past. So, being able to do all this skips the Fire Sanctuary, the Ancient Cistern, having to get Furore's Courage and the Thunderhead, the Water Dragon Scale, the Fire Shield Earrings. All that stuff is now gone because we can just get the proper flags that we need from accessing Boss Rush early. So now the 80% run has kind of just turned into a, rush to get to Lanayru as fast as possible. It's possible to get to Lanayru in just a little under 1 hour, using all the techniques that we know of. And then we still have to get the harp. We don't technically need to play the harp anywhere, but we need the harp because it's necessary to put the sealed temple in a state that actually loads the Gate of Time properly. So that's necessary to get, but the harp is only a few minute detour, so it's not that bad. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. The run is now, about 35 minutes faster than it used to be, and it's also actually a lot easier. The big notable thing about this route, other than it being much faster, is that we don't have to do the Wing Ceremony cutscene skip on Skyloft anymore, right? In previous routes, we had to do this cutscene skip that you only had a 2-frame window of, and you didn't really have an audio or visual cue for it, so you just kind of had to mash for it and hope you got it. And if you failed it, it was run over. You had to reset, because it was only 7 minutes into the run, and it wasted 2 minutes if you failed it. So that is now out of the route because there's a faster route that we can utilize on Skyloft to take advantage of more bit magic uses later in the run. And it's also possible because we don't need to get the practice sword anymore, since the practice sword was required for reverse bit magic shenanigans in previous routes, but not in this one. But yeah, I think that mostly about covers it. So yeah, I hope that all made sense. I'm just doing this in a single take, so hopefully everything made logical sense to everyone, at least as far as like the any % run goes now. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you for more speedruns. Peace.